Hey, everybody, and welcome to Mega Shift today. I am really excited to welcome Erica Hanson. Erica is a global developer relations and community leader who's built programs at a number of amazing companies like Google and Flutter Flow. And she knows how to drive adoption and advocacy and impact at scale. And we're going to learn about what all that actually means today. So, how are you doing, Erica?
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. Yeah, it's a bit cold here in New York, but as expected, but yeah, things are going well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The winter in New York is something fierce this year. We've had a couple snows and just trying to be as cozy as we can. And
Exactly.
so I definitely get that. So excited to have you on the Mega Shift podcast today. And of course, you and I work together at Google on the developer community. And since then, you have done some really amazing work in the low code, no code space at Flutter Flow and
Mhm.
are building communities and scaling programs. So I'd love to learn a bit more about your background, how you got into this space, and in particular, with 17 years at Google, what that was like. So, how does that sound? We'll hop into it.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so I've had a number of career pivots, and most of them were pivoting internally at the same company. And I think that's what kept me at Google for 17 years. So at first, I was right out of college at Google. I was in the Bay Area, and I joined the customer service sales team that's like all of Google's ads and working with clients on that. And I realized I didn't it was great interacting with people and sales was fine, but I didn't love it. So after 4 years of that, I found an opportunity in London, and that's when I was able to shift into sales strategy and operations, basically project management. I really liked working on projects. And so that's when I really worked on those skills. But then I didn't love the projects I was working on. So I was looking for new opportunities to work on projects, but that made an impact, that was working with like external communities, like education. So I was looking for opportunities and I did a bunch of side projects. Like there were 20% projects at Google where you could work on projects with other teams to build skills. And I found a rotation in Singapore. It was called Women on the Web, helping women start businesses online, teaching them, but about Google products, how Google products can help start a business online. And so I did that for 3 months, was in Singapore, loved it. I was able to network with other teams, and eventually a job opened up on a team that I was collaborating with. They did community programs, but more on the business side. And so I applied and got that role, and then there was a reorg, and so I somehow ended up in developer relations through a reorg. And then I never left. Basically, I did developer relations for 10 or 11 years at Google and absolutely loved it. Developer relations is just all about helping developers be successful on the platform. It's a lot of evangelism, upskilling, but a lot of the work the team did was through scalable initiatives like community programs. So I loved working on that. And I spent 4 years in Singapore. I was focusing mostly on Indonesia. So managing any of Google's programs for like developers. Like I led an Android training program and startup programs we had there, like a lot of upskilling, community building, but focus on Indonesia. And that I absolutely loved it. Had some great experiences, learned a lot. And then I'd say the highlight was this Google Developer Student Club program. I know we got to work on that together. So that was basically on university campuses around the world. Students would form clubs, and the content would be Google's developer products. And we'd have various like events and campaigns that they could run. But the students run these clubs and we give support. And so I was able to grow it from, it was in India and I grew it globally with the team. And we were able to have quite a few clubs around the world. So that was probably the highlight. And that's what took me to New York. Yeah, I was with Google there for 4 years and became a team manager, looking at all of Google's developer community programs. So it was great. Every reason I stayed so long really was because I was able to pivot. And then I realized, okay, developer relations, community building, connecting with champions of products and really engaging with them and thinking of fun events and campaigns they can run. That's what I love doing. And so that's why I've stayed in that space since.
Wow, thank you so much. Such a cool journey. And as you started talking about that, I think one thing that's really unique about like the Google ecosystem is that there's like all these different apps and products, and it's a suite of products, right? And then that took you to Flutter Flow, which is a drag and drop app builder where you're building communities and driving growth there and scaling that. And so zooming out, when you think about creating community around a product or a tool, what is the way that you like to think about that? Is it really product specific, or do you take a general approach?
Yeah, it does depend on the product, and but there's can be some things that are applied generally as well. So at Google, there were a lot of it was helpful that there were so many products that people could use to build, like Android and then Firebase, and now there's Gemini. And so there's a lot of things that the community can work with, and some community leaders have an interest in different products. And then at Flutterflow, when I joined, so I was managing the developer relations team there for about a year and a half, and there are about like 2 million folks had signed up for the product. A lot of people in the kind of no code, low code space, not much of a background as developers, but then there were developers as well and entrepreneurs. So it was a mixed audience. So I first wanted to understand, is there an interest in people gathering? Is there an interest in like a community program at a startup? At Google, it was clear. And so we did send out a survey. There was a quarterly community survey, and we sent out a survey just asking if there was a meetup in your city, would you join it? Would you join a community? And it was about 70% of the people said yes. And then we asked which city. It was all the major cities like Paris and New York. So that was enough to, okay, let's do this. And so we ended up creating a developer community program. Now there's 60 communities, and I think it's 20 countries and 20,000 members. And so even with this startup, like there was enough interest, and I was able to use some of the stuff I learned from Google. It's okay, what's the platform? We used Meetup. It was helpful for everything in one place for us to see some of the numbers. And there was an interest from people. And then some of the same playbook, like a campaign series, help supporting by saying, okay, now we're going to do this sort of campaign, or here's some content, here's like a workshop, and providing some budget for some of the events, providing like branding materials to make it consistent, and using some of the same frameworks of people are number one. It's so important to pick great people to lead these communities. They're volunteers. And so making sure there's like the right motivation, they have some experience and interest in the product. That's always very helpful in picking the right people and to make sure that the program lasts for a while and people have a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, like that survey and just being data backed, right? Even if that data is a little scrappy, just seeing is there demand for this, and let's just take a pulse check. And so that's just like a strong leadership instinct that you have. And obviously, leaders want data to make their decisions. So as
Right.
started to think about ambassador programs or doing requesting budget for something like the United Nations Solution Challenge that Google hosted in partnership with them,
Mm.
so integrated, like large campaign. How do you sell that through? As you probably, of course, learned the Google way of doing this. It might vary from FANG company to FANG company, but generally speaking, how do you like to build consensus? How do you sell these type of programs through in your career so far?
Yeah. So with the student program at Google, my manager at the time, we were looking at Southeast Asia, and we were just seeing that I organized a training program for building Android apps. I trained through the program, 17,000 people were trained. And a lot of the people going to those events were students. And I started engaging more with students, and they were really excited to learn. They were interested at the time in certifications, and they really wanted to become more job ready. And I was like, actually, we don't have a program that's just specific to students. So it felt like there was a gap. So my manager was open to that, like creating something, at least like piloting it in our region first and just seeing, how it goes. And he noticed, yeah, there's a gap. And so that makes sense to focus on the audience, because the Google Developer Groups program, these are communities around the world. They host meetups about Google's developer products. Those were meant more for professional developers, although some students would go to those events too. So first it was like understanding what are the goals of the organization. Generally, it was like reach and awareness, understanding and goals of like individual people and like the leadership and different teams, and then seeing if there's any gaps. And then from there, pitching like pilots. It's let's not just go global with something really fast and assume everyone will be interested. It's can we just start locally? So that's where I wanted to do something in Southeast Asia. And then the other question was like, is there something that already exists that's like this? That was my manager's question. And so we found out actually there's a very similar program. It was Developer Student Clubs, existed in India for 2 months. They were piloting it there. So then I connected with the founder of that program, Deepak, was like, "Hey, instead of reinventing the wheel, I like what you're doing. It's basically a club on a campus and students are talking about Google's developer products." And he's, "Yeah, sure." So I piloted it in Indonesia, that went well, and I asked if I could take over the program. And then I the 2 pilots went well, and then basically I was focused on showing impact, like numbers reached, and then I got some support from neighboring teams, like there was a marketing team that cared a lot about these sort of upskilling initiatives, so I got their buy-in and they were willing to give some budget. And so then presenting it to the leadership and saying, "These pilots are going well. Can we expand?" And then they were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I also put budget into making videos. And those videos were a couple of them were like emotional, and there was a really cool story of someone who didn't think they could build something and they did because of the community and it impacted others. So I was really focused on storytelling and then showing impact through small pilots. And there were some people that were not on board, like, in the regions. This is gonna be more work for me to take on, but I had to show the value, and I made sure to show the value with the pilots and original starting kind of regions.
Nice, nice. And yeah, Google has this amazing scale, and that was something that helped the program build traction and momentum. And it grew to, I believe, like upward of 2,000 universities at 110 countries as of 2024. And now with AI, it might even be more, but almost like 3 million coders and students annually. And that huge kudos to you for doing that. And I got to be part of some of that work. And it's really awesome, like touching countries like Vietnam, India, China, Canada, US, like Mexico. It's the scale is amazing. So numbers started to speak for themselves, but there's a human element and
Mm.
cross-functional working element to being
Right.
successful in an environment like that. So how did you discover their goals? Was it just through OKRs and just like the embedded processes at the company, or do you feel like you did something that has helped you in your career navigating these spaces in tech?
Yeah, for sure. I think and in terms of the numbers, we were reaching about 1.8 million for the student program per year and yeah, 2,000 clubs. And then with the Google Developer Groups program combined, the student one and the developer groups, it was 3 million annually. And yeah, I did especially for Indonesia since I wanted to pilot the program there first. I had built a great network of partners. Like there was he was on the communications and PR team. We worked really well together. And if I hosted events, he'd have the press there, would write make sure there's blog posts or would guide on some of the videos we created. And so I understood his goals and then also the country manager and then just teams that would have there would be some alignment and goals. There also the marketing team and then the policy team working with the government. And across all the teams, really they cared about like upskilling and really cared a lot about students in particular and just showing that Google is helping other people learn and grow as developers and build some cool things. So we had some alignment there and I knew that. And so I was able to go to them and say, "Hey, can you want to partner together?" And sometimes asking for some budget. Sometimes it's just like support. Can we get someone from the government to come and join or can we get the press there for this certain type of event? And so just trying to align on and it was yeah, it was very much aligned and working together, so that was helpful. And in terms of getting budget, there was a global marketing team that cared about these kind of initiatives, so I was able to get a good chunk of budget from them, not even from the team I was on. I think that's also why the team was more open. They're like, "Oh, our budget's coming from another team to really start this." But that was just the beginning. Once the program was running, I was regularly reaching out to different teams, like product teams specifically, like Android, had someone at Firebase I would talk to. And with them, I wanted to understand their goals. Like they want like more people trained on those products, but I would ask them like, "Hey, can you be a speaker or a judge for the solution challenge, the annual competition where students solve for the United Nations goal and a sustainable development goal and build a project using Google's products." And so I'd say, can you be a judge or can you provide content? So sometimes the teams would build like a workshop, like content for the students to run directly. And we do train the trainer events. And so it was aligned, like they cared about more people getting trained. And I always wanted more content and support from them and their direct help in upskilling the students. And so it was just like building those relationships early and asking for very specific things at very specific moments. Like the solution challenge happens once a year. I needed 5 judges. So every year I'd go to them. We need someone from the Android team there. And so it was just helpful when I had something specific versus, hey, can you help us? And in general, it helped to have very specific acts and goals and things that we were working towards together.
Nice, nice. So it's yeah, it sounds like it's just like a lot of listening and just that institutional know-how and like the timing and everybody setting their calendars and but also there's that spontaneity element and saying, "Hey, we have a really great platform for your product and all these students are really engaged, so why don't you come hang out?" And then that can build on its own success. So it sounds like it was a really cool matrix that you had built, and the numbers speak for themselves there. And so moving to Flutter Flow, which was a different paradigm, like more of a startup, when you think about building community and like bringing student ambassadors along or doing hackathons that are focused on making an impact and using AI or integrating this drag and drop experience. So taking that relationship building in a large environment like Google and mapping it to something more nimble like Flutter Flow, what were some of the similarity and differences that stood out to you?
Yeah, the first thing that I did at Flutterflow, they had about 2 million signups. I was employee number 50. It definitely more nimble, less consensus building, it just move. And so that was a great experience. And the first thing I wanted to do was talk to the champions already of the product. Like they already had 2 million signups. They already had a community forum. They used Better Mode as the platform. And there were community moderators already who are just passionate Flutterflow builders. So that was the first thing I wanted to do, just talk to them and ask them like, what are they building? Why are they using the product? What do they like? What could be improved? But also, do they what how else do they want to connect with other builders and just getting feedback or what are some of the trends in the community forum? Where are people blocked? Is there more stuff that our team would create, like the documentation? We did all the YouTube videos and our team also passed feedback to the product team, and then we did all of the community building efforts. And yeah, I just wanted to listen and learn and understand them. I even got to meet them in person, which was great in Germany. We met a couple of the moderators. And so that was step 1, just talking to the existing champions. And we also had a YouTube content creators program that was another ambassador sort of program where they were creating videos because they used the product, and so they just were explaining it in their local language how to use Flutterflow. And so I talked a lot to them and gathered feedback. And so I think that was definitely the first step and something I would do for both or the next company I join. I just want to talk to the champions first, understand some basic things there, and also get some feedback about what else we could do. And so that was pretty similar. And then sending out that survey was helpful because I didn't want to assume because I'm hearing like the phrase community-led growth a lot now from startups, companies. And so I think that's great, but I think community can be a great way to reach more people at scale and engage with the champions, but like you said earlier, some of the data, do people want to meet or how do they want to learn? How do they find out about the product? Those were some things that we dug into. Do they want more videos or do they want to communicate through Discord, or are they happy with the community forum, or they want in person. Trying to get that information through surveys was something I focused more on at a startup before, just and piloting things at a smaller scale, and also reaching out to our network. So I hired someone from Google, Mono, who led the developer community. I led the student program. And yeah, we started small at first, and it was like people in our network who were also involved in Google communities, but we knew they were great community organizers. We worked with them first to start the programs because we knew that they were very experienced and they had already 10,000 people in their communities. So we went through like people we already knew who were great builders, and then eventually started adding more people to that, and then they could support each other and share best practices. So there were some differences with the startup for sure, but some kind of similarity, like kind of core things that I had to put in place to make sure it was successful and that we should do it in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting how, yeah, just having these different pieces come together of taking that feedback and sharing it with product and then discussing those changes and then getting it in their roadmap. And as you mentioned, this like community led growth is really connected to the product experience and how companies are innovating now and how they understand their users.
Mhm.
Because it's qualitative instead of quantitative, right? Like you can actually see what they say in a survey versus watching their clicks on a screen or whatever it might be. There's something really special about that. So as a leader in community, how do you like to prioritize survey responses like that, or like how do you separate signal from noise if somebody's like just complaining in a forum or in a survey? Like, do you like how do you tend to synthesize that information or have your team synthesize it? Like I've heard you say feedback is a gift, so receive that.
Yeah, it's true because sometimes there are some people who are passionate users, but also they're just louder and maybe more critical. In general, I do always like to have somebody who's like within a company that I work with and also externally who plays devil's advocate or is very direct and generally will be super direct and sometimes focus on the negative things. But I like to have at least a couple people like that because I'm like, okay, then there's some that are just like, I love it and generally positive. So it's just good to have a mix. And so I like to brainstorm with those like kind of devil's advocate kind of category of people. And that's helped build programs or helped with the success of starting things out for sure. But yeah, I do think feedback is a gift. It can be tough and sometimes it's okay. That's possible to change or not, or this person just always is complaining. But it's like definitely important to listen. And I think, especially when it's anonymous, sometimes they're even more direct. And it's helpful. It's good just to know. And you can always make improvements based on that. But yeah, I think what are some of the other ways? Yeah, getting feedback because we had a community forum, and that's where we started to gather feedback, especially after new releases. Sometimes there would be bugs. And so there was an engineer on the team who started consolidating like the feedback after releases. And so she was, yeah, pulling from that. Here's some of the big things. Here's some suggestions or ways that we can improve some of this in the future. Maybe we need to update we had a beta tester program. So she suggested some tweaks to that program. So we had a few different forums. We would also look at Twitter and in general, like, are there some suggestions? But the surveys, the quarterly surveys, eventually they became, maybe we started doing them twice a year. Those were helpful, but especially if we could ask some of the same questions every time. So we see over time, like, okay, are people getting happier with our documentation and YouTube videos, or is it going down? That was helpful, and it was helpful to focus on, like, very specific things we had changed, like, we changed the way that we organize our documentation, or we have a new platform, like, what do you think about it? Like, getting very detailed about one topic was helpful as well, but then also, it was helpful to have forums where we could talk with the super users who were those champions. Like we had a monthly meeting with the moderators, and I would always ask my first question always, I was like, What trends are you seeing? What are people DMing you that they're not telling us? Because sometimes folks would just wanted to complain to them directly and not tell us things. So we had that forum. Then we had the student ambassadors. They had their own feedback, and we could get a sense, like insights from them. And then the YouTube content creators. So we had like space where we were meeting monthly. And that was helpful too, just to have forums where we talked to the super users. So I think like for scale and general trends, a survey, but then having forums where there's like a feedback forum with the super users is helpful, and having a mix and knowing who's out there that's generally always going to complain or always going to be rosy pictured, and just to keep that in the back of my mind.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting because there's like all these different, there can be like dynamics at play within the company, and there can be dynamics in play within the users and how they like to engage with the product. And so it's interesting being able to spin all those plates at the same time and make sense of it and say, oh, this person's super positive all the time. So we need to like disregard that. And this person's negative, but this person's been like pretty an average response. So now they're skewing negative. So maybe we should look at that. And obviously, I'm being anecdotal, but I think that's really interesting to have that intuition professionally that you act on and manage it against. And then the second thing is it sounds you're from in your work, like you create like a lot of trust in all those various groups. Like it's the
Hmm.
trust with the users and the trust with your peers and colleagues and reports. So I guess saying the quiet part out loud, like you have this like operating system that's very trust is very inherent in the way you operate. I don't want to make any assumptions. I'm just repeating
Yeah.
back what I'm hearing. So it's really
Yeah.
cool. And obviously having worked with you, like, thank you. And but I think it's unique to like because community can just become like so sprawling and to measure what matters and know what the leaders want and then go to the community and make sense of all that noise. It's really valuable and cool. So as you facilitate this community and look at the forums and check in on the users and meet with stakeholders. I've heard you mention this thing. It's called like the 7 Ps of community. I think it's from the CMX Hub, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. But you don't have to list all seven. If any stand out to you, what are some of the trust is one maybe? What are some of the Ps or Qs that might be your guidepost in everything we've discussed so far?
Yeah, I used to use that when training new student ambassadors every year. At Google, it was like an annual process, and some of them had never led communities before, so that was one of the first places I would start is from CMX. And the 7 Ps of community are just like a framework for building a successful and long-lasting community. And some of the P's would be like people, just thinking about what kind of people do you want to have at this event, and are you do you want to focus more on mobile app development in general, or do you want it to be a bit more about web, or just there's certain, or do you want it to be beginners or more advanced? So just thinking of the people. And I guess the most important one is purpose. What's the purpose of this community, and what are some of the goals? And then other things to think about are just like the promotion, like how do you get the word out, and also, yeah, so just it just helps to make sure that you have some of this in mind, because sometimes people just jump right in and they're like, okay, let's just invite people and they'll come, but you have to really think first about, okay, like the purpose, the people, how you're going to promote it, the place, do you want it to be? I've started organizing events like coffee networking events for people who've been laid off or job searching. And for me, I thought about, so for people, it was like people who've been laid off or job searching. That's who I want to focus on. Purpose, I want people to have support and just like connect with other people. Right now, it's not about necessarily getting them their next job. It's a bit more about like just providing the support. And then place, I wanted it to be at a coffee shop. It's been at the same coffee shop twice. So it's just like to go through each one just really helps set up the community. And a big thing that I would also share with the students, especially actually any community, is like having the right core team, and just making sure it's not just one person, especially for a bigger community, like having people with a diverse background and different things that people can own and focus on. And so sometimes it's a core team of 3 who are co-leading this community. So people's also, who do you pull in to help? And if you have kind of sponsors or supporters, like at a university, it might be a professor could support the community. So having the right people leading it, and then also being clear about who you want to focus on, because that'll change the content. If you're going to focus on beginners, you, that's important. And because then more advanced people might get frustrated. So just setting those expectations and going through the framework really helps communities be more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that there's this framework that can be applied to designing it's like designing a marketing program, it's designing community programs. So it's interesting to have these P's that one can go through, and it's really cool that you use that in your work or some variation of it. And communities can really impact folks' lives like in different ways. As you mentioned, some folks at Google learned how to code and built really amazing things that like saved their towns from like crop disease, I recall, or
Yeah.
like sending like the use cases are beyond drones, and it could go on and on. But so I guess the crux of it is communities can technology communities, alumni communities, like just community in general is like its own kind of niche industry. But I've heard you share this really cool story about your dad had wanted to maybe join a community, wasn't sure, and then he did. So I'd love to hear that story from you. You shared it at DevRel Con, so just wanted to give you space to share that again if it means something special to you.
Yeah, for sure. I've been in the community space, like community building for 10 years, and then it was like maybe 4 years ago that I realized, "Oh, wait a minute. I have a model of what a great long-lasting community looks like." And that's when I remembered that my dad has been part of a tech community for over 40 years. Think yeah, probably about 43 years. And it's called ISACA in Los Angeles. They focus on like IT auditing, and now cybersecurity and AI are big topics at their events. And so he joined his first event because he had a work question, and he doesn't remember if it ever got answered, but he kept going. And then he got he says, roped into like volunteering. Eventually, he was a speaker, and then he became the president, and he's played all different kind of roles, and now he's retired, and this is the only thing he does. He walks the dog and exercises, but that this is his main thing, and he still volunteers for the community. So I've been to a couple events with him. I've spoken at two of the events, like for their virtual events. So I've gotten involved. They just had an end of year part event that I went to in December. So that's like one example to me is like of it, just like a community that created a sense of belonging. They went to my dad's 70th birthday party. It was a surprise. There was 13 of them there. And so it's just like he's an introvert, but he found a space there, and he's helped people get jobs. Other people have helped him in other ways. And so when you're part of a community that long, it's just yeah, there is that sense of belonging. Job opportunities pop up, people support each other. And so that's to me like a model of a great community.
Nice. It's really interesting because, like, on the flip side, tech is changing some of these things. Like, people are meeting up in real life again, and Zoom is just like part of our lives, but nobody really wants to go to a webinar these days, like post COVID. With kind of the landscape as it is, your dad's experience has been timeless, it's lasted him a lifetime. Obviously there's different communities that I'm part of, that you're part of. Like, what would you say, if any, is like a shift that you're seeing? What about community should people be thinking about professionally, or if they want to join a community that kind of feels like a shift that will carry them through the next this AI craze the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing now is more I'm seeing more communities popping up. I almost started a community for women in tech in 2019. I did some research. There weren't that many events. There also weren't now there's a lot of platforms like Luma is super active, like place to find events, and there's other platforms as well. And so now there's just tons of events and communities. I'm seeing more communities where you can like pay. There's some sort of membership to be a part of it too. And then you join a Slack group, and there's some workshops and events. And so, like smaller curated and paid experiences, I'm seeing those pop up. And I'm actually going to probably join one of them soon and in New York. And with AI, I think that's because it's like just everywhere, and people want more like in-person stuff so they can like actually meet people physically. Relationship building is becoming more important, especially in the job search. It really helps to meet the people in person or make those connections early, and that'll present opportunities later because it is so competitive out there. So I think with the shift in AI, more in-person events and communities, more like paid, curated, small membership kind of groups that provide value. And so that's a big shift. It's great to see like community companies are like, "Oh yeah, we want to create a community. We want it like virtually. There's Discord and other platforms, but also they are craving and wanting like in-person events to get people together." So I'm seeing a lot more jobs popping up, especially at like startups. Some of the big tech companies have had community programs for many years. So it's cool that it's like LinkedIn is like full of like community building tips and types of events. So that's the big shift that people see the value. There's a desire. They don't want to do as much like virtual meeting and it's more like in person. So I'm really happy to see that. And yeah, I think it's going to continue to go in that direction for sure.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. I think just being able to connect with people in person and see them, and sometimes if you go into AI events in New York, there's some regulars that show up, and it's, oh, I
Mhm.
think I saw you at that. And so yeah, it can definitely be a fun way to meet folks as well as just expand your knowledge. Thanks for sharing that. As you mentioned, you spent time abroad in the Asia Pacific area, Indonesia, Singapore. As a world traveler, and of course you went to a lot of other places when you were at Google, like just for offsites, things like that. What would you say are things that you've picked up in your travel that you feel like impact your leadership style or how you like to design these community programs and lead teams? Is there anything that really stands out as kind of that multiculturalism or packing really light, anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. It was a few years in London and then, yeah, 4 years in Singapore and a lot of travel in Southeast Asia. And so what it did that did shift my mindset in general, and I would always think of, "Okay, what does diversity mean to this region?" I know at the time when I was at Google, there was a focus on diversity or at least, like, having because sometimes at events, it's 10% women, and so there were some efforts to engage more women to get involved at some of these events and upskill them, and but diversity was different in each region, and that was something I was always on the lookout for. What does diversity mean for this region? And also, are there things for when if we're running events that we should consider? We should have a prayer if there's an all-day tech event in Indonesia, we should have a prayer room and just considering like the prayer times as well around meals. And so it was just like thinking about, okay, what's important in this region? How do we make sure people feel comfortable and have the space to learn and but also like we want to make sure that we're accommodating everybody and thinking about accessibility. And so that mindset that definitely helped me think, okay, what are all the things that we should consider when we're finding great community leaders and also running events in these regions. That was one big thing. And also, like, just working with folks from different countries is different. And also, I understand that, yeah, I'm American. And so working with me is probably different from them. But it's just like, okay, how do you, sometimes it's like asking questions early on, like, how do you like to work? How do you communicate? Or what's a good way to give you feedback or receive feedback? And like having those kind of open conversations early just to understand. And then and really listening as well and getting to know people well and spending time with them, having a tea and really learning more about them. And because I was also curious, there were some really cool dishes that they like to eat or make, and I wanted to know more about that. And so there was a lot for me to learn, but it just helped me be more like nimble and flexible. And I think having a diverse team of people from different countries just makes the team even better, especially for running global programs, because each region and something that works in one country might not work in a different country, and so it's important to listen and understand why and what might work in one place versus another.
Yeah, that definitely struck me when I was at Google as well. Just that emphasis on the cross cultural communication and understanding the nuances of how you're working, who you're working with. But as you mentioned, it's a force multiplier that like it brings all these different understandings and behaviors and practices to the work. And when you're doing something that's truly impactful, fixing crops in a city or inspiring people to make something or change their income potential for the rest of their lives, right? To like impact can be universal, right? There
Mhm.
might be a lot of different ways of reading an advertisement, but when somebody's okay, this is affecting like the socioeconomics here, and that means something to everyone. And it might be some variance, but impact can be universal. And so huge kudos for that. And then just a fun one. I know you became a mother since we worked together and on the journey of parenting. Is there anything that becoming a parent has changed your relationship with technology or how you like to give your direct team their own logging off time? Like what about being a parent has shifted? Is that something that you put any thought to, or just you're one foot in front of the other? Yeah, so any thoughts there?
Yeah, it definitely changed things, and it's helped me be a bit more efficient with the workday, I would say. It's okay, really needing to prioritize and my child in daycare, which is great most of the day. So it's okay. I want to really focus. I don't want to be on my phone and answering Slack messages or emails while I'm with her because there's such limited time in the day when she goes to bed early. And so I do prioritize a bit better, and I'd say more efficient with my time because yeah, I want to be like fully present with whatever I'm doing, focus on work 100%, then my daughter afterwards. And it helped me understand, like, other parents a bit more as well. Like, I always liked hearing about their kids and how old they were, but now I'm, like, really understanding, okay, each age is very different, and there's different things they're going through, and understand that now I have a better understanding that kids are always sick sometimes when they're coming home, and it's okay, so it just helped me understand some of the other parents I've been working with, but also helping with prioritization and just appreciating life a bit more. And because community building has been so important for me, also like how to build. I've been meeting up with other parents and have go to happy hour. It's important to meet at the playground with the other kids and for her to feel like she's part of a community. Just like subtle things like community building early on, because it is really good to have that network and great people to connect with. So we can all do this because we're all doing this together in New York City. Yeah, more of an appreciation for life as well, and that everything is learned. Like you have to learn how to do everything, and it's just fun to see that every the new thing she learns each day.
Wow, that's really special. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so we've really talked about so much interesting stuff, just building global programs, getting pulses on your community, kind of multiculturalism, cross-cultural collaboration and leadership. So is there anything that we haven't chatted about today that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's been fun just reflecting on community building, and I like that this is the direction people are going in general, wanting to meet in person and have real in-person connections. So that's great to see. It really there's just more opportunities to connect and help each other and support each other, and yeah, it's been great to see. But yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Mega Shift. We had Erica Hanson here talking all about her awesome career building communities for developers and beyond. So we'll catch you next time on Mega Shift. Thank you.
Thank you.